Hi, my name is Cora, and my project is called Mapping Mutual Aid Resources in Boston. And I was advised by Professor Anne Shorchinati, and she's here today, so thank you. So first, I want to just get into the question, what is mutual aid? This is basically the cooperative exchange of resources and services within a community. And it tends to have leftist political motivation. So a lot of these organizers have a shared understanding that the system we live in today doesn't meet our needs, and so it's a way for communities to come together and for people to care for each other. And usually it's non-hierarchical, collective, and reciprocal in nature. A good quote that really sums this up is that mutual aid is solidarity, not charity. And a really important historical example is the Black Panther Party's survival program. So in the 60s, they had tons of things going on. They had free ambulance programs, a legal aid program, education programs, and then by the late 60s, they were serving nutritious breakfast to 20,000 children in different cities across America every morning. And so to bring it back to the present, the informal support networks really grew during the COVID-19 pandemic because this was such a time of need. A lot of systems were struggling, and during this time, many groups were organizing online and they were spreading information via social media. And this is how I first learned about mutual aid. And it's what inspired this project because I was noticing how there wasn't one single resource where you could go to find all the information that you might be interested in. So my project objectives were to, number one, create a map of mutual aid resources in the Boston area to expand access, and number two, to learn about the structure, challenges, and successes of mutual aid from local organizers. So this is a screenshot of the map that I created, and it encompasses Boston and several of the surrounding cities and towns. I created it on Google Maps, so it's online, it's free, and it's easily accessible. And to gather the information about the mutual aid groups, I pretty much just did a ton of Google searching, and I found all the social media pages, the websites, and I compiled all those links, which I have on the map. And so you're able to deselect and select which layers are displayed depending on what you're interested in. And so to get into those different layers, into the different types of mutual aid that I have on the map, in the green, on the green dots are community fridges. So these are free refrigerators located in the community, and a really common philosophy about them is to take what you need and give what you can. Then the red layer is mutual aid pods. So there's so many models of what these look like, but pretty broadly, they're groups that get together to share resources, and this can be material goods, such as money and food. It can also be services like childcare or running errands, and even immaterial goods like information sharing and emotional support. So then the yellow layer is Buy Nothing groups, and this is a global network that encourages people to freely give and exchange items instead of buying and selling them. Then in blue is the citywide resources. So this is pretty much other miscellaneous things. And when you are using the map on your phone, it can take you right to where the fridge is, or it can show you what other resources are available in your neighborhood, either from a standpoint of needing something or having something to give. So after I made this map, I was still left with some questions. Number one, how are mutual aid groups organized? Number two, what challenges do mutual aid groups face? And number three, what makes it possible to sustain mutual aid over time? And to answer these questions, I engaged in discussions with community organizers. So first, I did some participant observation, and this was in the form of some food distribution ride-alongs. So I actually got to help participate in the work that these organizers are doing. And then I also did some community fridge volunteer shifts. I also engaged in semi-structured informal interviews, which basically means I had chats with people. And so I spoke with people from all these organizations shown here. So it's the Alston Brighton Community Fridge, Cambridge City Growers, Mutual Aid Eastie, Roslindale Community Fridge, Watertown Community Fridge, Newton Community Fridge, Newton Neighbors Helping Neighbors, and Mutual Aid Medford and Somerville. So thinking about my findings, how are mutual aid groups organized? Their level of structure really varies. On the left, they said this is a relatively informal effort, there's really no hierarchy, it's an equitable power distribution, and I've never actually met any of them in person. And then in contrast, on the right, this person said it's like concentric circles. There are 15 to 20 coordinators, and then there are 50 frequent volunteers and 100 to 150 infrequent volunteers. And we try to keep the structure pretty horizontal. Then thinking about the challenges that these organizers face and discuss with me, there's really high needs within the community in this area. So on the left, Our neighbors are dealing with displacement, undocumented status, evictions, homelessness, food insecurity, and poverty. Then there's also a lot of logistical challenges that they face. On the top, it's hard to keep the fridges stocked because so many people rely on it for groceries. It's just difficult to connect all the different moving pieces. And then on the bottom was a discussion about sustaining momentum, which can be really tricky. So we struggle a lot with burnout and the sadness that can come from this work. It's really hard to just keep it going. So then thinking about what does make it possible to sustain mutual aid over time. One really key factor is strong interpersonal connections. This quote on the top, our group keeps going because we've built relationships and a strong community. We don't want to abandon our friends, so we stick around. Also, it's really important that there's diversity of the people involved, and all types of people are really engaging in this. So on the right, our fridge hasn't failed like so many others because it's in a mixed income neighborhood. People in the true middle class are cooking meals, rescuing food, and participating in the mutual aid that's required for success. And it's also really important that the organizers are dedicated and really invested in this work. So on the bottom, there are lots of hard things that I come across, but there's also resilience and hope. I get such joy from this work. So my key takeaways from all of this, I really learned how the specifics of mutual aid groups in Boston vary so greatly, but they're all doing really important work. Sustaining mutual aid is difficult, but despite this, a combination of interpersonal relationships, a sense of community, neighborhood diversity, dedication, and optimism keeps it going. Mutual aid groups also don't often have the bandwidth for advertising and outreach, and this is where I think the map can come in and help bring people in and expand the scope. And I overall was just super inspired by everything that I learned. So looking forward, I hope to distribute the map more widely to amplify its impact, and also through that to encourage people to become involved with local mutual aid efforts. And I also am really excited about beginning to incorporate mutual aid more into my own life. Thank you so much to Professor Anchortinati again, and to all my interview respondents. I'm so grateful for everyone who shared their stories with me. And now I would like to ask you can please explore the map on your own. So there's a QR code here you can scan with your phone, or you can also, there's a tiny URL in my abstract in the pamphlet. I will say it's easier to see all the information on a computer, but using it on your phone, you can kind of get a sense of how the different layers work and how this might be a useful resource. So as you look at that, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
I know you briefly touched on the history of mutual aid and stuff, but I was just wondering if some of the organizations you found in the Boston area were, like, how old are they? Have they been around for a really long time, or are they relatively new? And kind of, were some of the more established ones maybe had like a larger scope of services, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so almost all of them really began in the last 3 years, either right at the beginning of the COVID pandemic or sometime later in 2020 or 2021. So pretty much all of them are pretty new. And I would say some of them are definitely more established and have like a little bit more power to get things done and really help a lot of people. But that tended to be based on sort of like what town it was in and what sort of skill set and resources the organizers had. Like, so in some of the wealthier suburbs, I was noticing that a lot of the people were like doctors and lawyers, and really they had a lot of time and experience organizing things. And so that kind of affected it more, I would say, than necessarily the age of the organization.
Okay. This was great. Do you have any plans for keeping this maintained? Maybe if you ever move away from Boston, right? How does this stay something that's going to be useful for people in the years to come?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Actually, during the course of this, I was even noticing that some things that I mapped first semester, by the time I checked like a couple months later, the fridge had shut down, or the resource, the mutual aid pod, like had gone out of function. It wasn't working anymore. So it's definitely really important to keep it up to date and keep adding the new ones. It's just like a really dynamic space. So I'll be staying in Boston next year, so I can definitely keep working on it then. But I also hope to distribute it out to all the people I talked with and all the organizations that I've mapped. And so maybe in the future, someone else would be able to take it on and keep this as a useful resource.
Thank you. First of all, I love this topic. I was wondering if you had and if you found anything when talking to the organizers about like the effectiveness of anonymous versus non-anonymous community aid. Like I know that obviously having like a face-to-face interaction probably stimulates more community interactions, but maybe like a anonymous community fridge might be more accessible to people that might feel embarrassed accessing those resources.
Yeah, that's so crucial. That is definitely something I talked about a lot, and I think it's one of the benefits of mutual aid is that whereas if you're getting like government benefits, there's a really difficult process and you have to go through a lot of paperwork and it's like means tested and there might be sort of a stigma, but mutual aid offers an alternative to that, and it does offer like a really collaborative opportunity, or it can be anonymous. And I think the collaborative side, it speaks to my findings about the importance of community and being like in space with other people and finding that support, but then also the anonymity of a fridge where you can come whenever it's free, whenever you want to, whenever you have time. And then some of the other things, one of the food ride-alongs that I went on, it was with Newton Neighbors, and so they go to food pantries and they drop off like families, you know, grocery bags of food for families that aren't able to come and get it themselves. And that was actually a pretty anonymous process. Like we would just drop it on their front door and then text them like, we've delivered the food, you can come get it. So I think there's definitely a scale of the amount of face-to-face interaction versus anonymity that you're able to get, which I think is a really beneficial part of mutual aid for sure.
There are no other questions. I want to say thank you to Cora, and we'll move into our transition period.